you and your husband might have been concerned about how he was perceived as being this kid in Iron One?
Well, the only way people saw him was if they came to the house, and if he was at Berkeley in his iron lung, which of course he had to be, and then he'd be in a chair. By this time, he was, he started out that thing I said about him being pushed up Burlingame Avenue by one of the kids, and the little kid asked what was wrong with him, and Ed had to figure out what to say about that. So he was making up his own story in the meantime about what to tell people about it. And like he'd sit on the street and his hand would turn over sometimes, and sometimes people would push money in it. And then he began to say, "Only a quarter? You can put some more in there." He began to make fun of these kinds of things that were kind of behavior. This is how you treat a cripple. Well, he was going to change some of that behavior if he could. So, yeah, he was changing the way people looked at him. And when he was on campus then, and eventually he had a push chair, and then he had a motorized chair, and then eventually he had a bigger motorized chair that was almost like a tank. And they had to change the controls of it because he had on his left hand, he had fingers that would push up, but they wouldn't push down. So they had to change the controls backwards. And so he had to make friends with the people who were doing the mechanics who were working on the chairs and who were working. And he made friends in the hospital with the night orderlies because he'd be awake at night when a lot of people weren't. And he made friends with some of the night orderlies who they found their home lives, and they're going home and playing piano at midnight and learning how to do all kinds of things that enlivened Ed's education. So that was a good thing, that he made friends all over the place. He was very charismatic kind of guy with his big eyes, and he just was interested in people. And that was a life-saving or a personality-saving, I guess, factor, that he could get interested in other people and talk to them. And of course, then that got him interested in who he was and why he was asking these questions and things. But it was good for him to expand his world, and that was easy for him to do.
So I'm guessing he wasn't shy kid in class. He kind of had to be outgoing because of his disability.
Oh, he was very outgoing. That was easy for him. He liked that when he was feeling good, and he tried to keep feeling good most of the time. The trouble, the worst time he had in his life was when just coming to terms with the fact after he had polio and came home. And he went up to Children's Hospital for a while for rehab kind of things, and found out that there were lots of things he couldn't do, but there were some things he could do. And he could influence people, only for a while he couldn't eat. He just wasn't hungry. It was like he said he was trying to commit suicide. He thought, well, maybe he'd be better off if he didn't eat. So I had a friend who, in our co-op nursery school where I had the younger kids, one of the dads was a psychiatrist, and I said, go over and meet Ed and talk to him and see what's going on. And he did, and talked. Ed had a private duty nurse that was on trying to feed him milkshakes and things, which Ed didn't want. So this guy suggested that private duty nurse be sent away, and that Ed, if he wanted to eat, he'd ask for it. And that's exactly what happened. As long as they weren't trying to force him to eat, he got hungry and he asked for food, and he began to eat, and he began to take care of himself a little better. It was kind of a turnaround for him to realize that nobody was going to stand around and push him to be something that he didn't want to be. So he did. And, in other words, expanded his life and made more friends. And it was after that that I found out about Children's Hospital in San Francisco that had more post-polio people and more help for, instead of just lying around in his tank, that they had classes and they had and lots of other students, young people, where at San Mateo, they didn't. So he went up there and was there for about a year, I think. And it was, and he came home from there just in a much better shape. And then from there, he went over to, and then at home, he was beginning to kind of fade a little bit, taking some classes at high school. And then I heard about San Leandro. There was a hospital and a polio, kind of a famous polio guy, doctor who was there having. So I called him to see if Ed could come over there, if it would be a better place for him to be for a while. And it was. It turned out that he wasn't in a Children's Hospital. I put him in a chest caress instead of he wasn't in the iron lung yet. And they had a chest caress over his chest. And he just wasn't getting enough oxygen. So he was getting blotches on his face. I didn't realize that they were lack of oxygen things. But when we got him over there, and they found out that he didn't have enough oxygen in his system, and they started increasing that. And then he got a kidney stone, which sent him into shock. And at that point, they put him back in the iron lung so he could breathe and not have to breathe on his own, that would breathe for him. And that, in effect, saved his life. And as much as several years had been trying to get out of the iron lung, but that was the big goal, to get him out of the iron lung. And here that was killing him. So with the shock of the kidney stone, the pain, then he was put back in the iron lung and he could just relax and let it breathe for him. So his life began to change. So when he came home from San Leandro Hospital, he came home with an iron lung. And my youngest son, Randy, had been at nursery school, and he came home from nursery school, and I was giving him lunch, and he saw the iron lung, which he had seen at the hospital when he was dead. But I said, well, it's time for your nap. Go out and have your nap. And he said, no, I can't, because that thing is going to put noisy in my ears. And I said, I will see it doesn't put noisy in your ears. So you take your nap and I'll keep it off. And you can, but it changed the life around the hospital, or around our house. So from then on, and Ed was in better shape, and he just faced life in a better way because he had more energy. Mm-hmm. The kids at high school donated the yearbook to him, and that was good. Yeah.
Why did you choose to become an advocate? Do you know?
Oh, yes. I told you, it's selfish to become an advocate. Ed would like to see the world that would be that would be accessible to everybody, whether you're in a wheelchair or a walker. Now that I'm in a walker, I appreciate curb cuts and things even more. But it's important for things for blind people, things for deaf people, for old people, for young people, and that would be his view of the world that he would like to see. Selfishly, see curb cuts for everybody. So he could get, he missed lots of meetings because he would get someplace and he couldn't get up onto the sidewalk or they wouldn't have a driveway that he could drive his chair up, because he liked being as independent as he could be, but there were some things that he had to have help with his chair. So his wanting to change the world, when he put the curb cuts in and went to speak about how important it was for the city to promote that to happen in Berkeley and around everywhere, the bicycles, baby carriages, all kinds of things. And now, as I say with my walker, it's really handy to go up a curb cut. And I like that. And that was good for Ed and other people with disabilities and without disabilities. So that would come across many categories of people and how they got around. So for him to want to change the world, it would be selfishly for him to get from campus to one of the classes on university, or for somebody else to get there too. But selfishly, that was for him. He wanted the convenience of that, and he didn't see why that couldn't help but help other people too. And of course, it still does. It's wonderful.
Why do you think you keep mentioning him being so selfish? I'm just trying to figure out why, because he obviously changed the world for a lot of people with disabilities, myself included. So why perceive it as selfish?
So why would he see it as selfish?
No, why do you see it as selfish?
Oh, because it was for his own good. And that's fine. I think most of us live through life going for our own good. And that's good as long as it doesn't trample on other people's rights to have things good for them too. But for Ed to have things right for him, curb cuts, that doesn't hurt other people. That helps him a lot and helps other people with disabilities, expands their worlds. And why not? That's a great thing. I call it selfish. I don't know that he called it selfish. But when he started CIL and some of these other places and hired all kinds of people with all kinds of disabilities, making their lives better and promoting these kind of services for other people, starting out as services that he needed more than some people. And I think that's a very good thing. I think lots of people who get into medicine, dentistry, school teaching, any of those things, it's because we needed that kind of solace in our own lives. We needed that kind of support. And if it helps other people, great. If it changes the world, great. If it opens up the world, great. Now, if it closes down the world, that's something else. A selfish kind of a thing that could close down the world. I guess we've had some politicians like that like to close down the world and have it only as they see it. And but as long as you can speak your mind, and Ed liked to speak his mind as he got to be older and smarter and realized that it was a good thing for him to speak his mind. And people would listen. That's wonderful. I call it selfish because that's what it was in our lives for him to promote his own disability. Bully, right on. Yes. Uh-huh.
So did he realize the impact he was having with not just himself, but with like people with the disabled community in general? Did he realize the impact he's having?
Oh, how could he not help it when they were inviting him all over the world to come to visit and to talk and to do different things? I think, of course, he realized what was happening. And that in itself was a good thing too, because it would help other countries open up to get their curb cuts and to get their braille things. Because the best thing he did was to combine people with disabilities.
How did he create his support system within the disabled community?
Oh, well, I think what I liked about Ed was, that another word for Ed, inclusive. Ed was so inclusive of all kinds of disabilities. He didn't have a special disability or a special kind of, other than pretty girls or something that might help his sex life. He had When he started CIL, he started hiring people that hadn't been able to get jobs anywhere else. Hale Zukas, who had a hard time talking and everything, and all kinds of people with all kinds of disabilities. And Ed hired them because he knew they were smart and they had lots to contribute. And he had to see that there was a way for them to be able to contribute what they had to say. And he promoted lots of people's lives at CIL by promoting health and equipment and seeing that CIL had a place for these people that he would hire. And I was just amazed sometimes at the numbers of disabilities that he included and the richness that would come from these people. That was just great that they hadn't been able to find another place to contribute. So I was another word for Ed, inclusive. I loved that part of him, inclusive. I'm kind of that way myself, but I just never thought of it as being particularly within the community with people with disabilities. And he sure did. He found a way to do it, and he provided a great ground force of people seeking their own paths and with help to do it and how to do it and learning how. That's great, a great talent to have. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So you obviously mentioned sex life a lot, and I know he had a son. What was his relationship with his son like?
What was what?
His relationship with his son like?
His relationships with his son?
Yeah.
Oh, he was so proud of his son. He and Kathy had their son Lee, and they headed at that house that Ed was working for Department of Rehab up in Sacramento, and they had a house. Ed got a house that could hold his iron lungs, so Kathy had Lee there at the house, so Ed was part of the birthing process, which was very, just good. It made him very close to Lee. And Kathy was an alcoholic. It turned out later that was too bad, but that was a little hard on it. Eventually led to a divorce, but she was a good person in lots of ways. So Ed would have Lee in the summertime when he was in school. He lived with his mother, with Kathy. But in the summertime, he would stay with us. If Ed was staying with me, then Lee would stay here with Ed and with us for summer and vacations. And then if Ed traveled, which he did a lot, he'd take an attendant and all his stuff, and he'd take his son along. And I must say, he spoiled him. Talk about being selfish. If he had to go give a talk someplace, he'd give the person who was working to help Ed, his helper, he would give him a credit card, and Lee, and take him shopping or take him to see different things. And that was a little hard for Lee after Ed died, because he was used to being treated quite well, and it didn't quite continue that way with other people taking him out with credit cards to spend money. But Lee did go through college, and he graduated from UC Santa Barbara. And where he is right now, I'm not sure. But the last time I heard from him, he was up in the Sacramento way. And I hope he's doing well. Okay. Yeah. But he was very proud of his son. If you see any of those videos, well, he'll talk about, and this is my son, and just so much pride. I'm not a disabled man with him. I'm dad, and he likes to say that very proudly. And that was very, very important to him. Yeah.
Well, yeah, I think we all want to be parents one day, or kind of be that mentor figure in someone else's life. I know I do. I think about that a lot. Just hopefully being a father one day, and kind of passing on everything my father taught me and grandfather taught me.
Yes, of course.
So, couple more questions. I think we'll wrap up here shortly.
Okay.
What would Ed's dream for the disability community today be?
Oh, I think his dream for the disability community that CIL would not be necessary, that ADSP at the university wouldn't be necessary, that those things would just be universally included, that it wouldn't have to be any separate kind of thing, but that it would be what people needed would be available, whether it's, it's kind of like the groups of people for the blind and for the deaf and things that we all need. I've got my hearing aids in and I could still not hearing as good as I used to, but I'm 101 years old. Oh, I didn't tell you, I'm 101 years old. And if some of my friends are here, they would say, and a half, because I will be 102 on April 1st in the next year, 22. So.
Well, happy birthday. No,
thank you.
Or happy past birthday, I guess.
Yeah, happy past birthday and happy coming birthday. It should be.
Yeah.
It should be a good one. Yeah, I hope so.
So it was really nice talking to you.
Thank you.
Thank you for your time.
You're very welcome.